Hi guys, it's Sandy Cogdell, and today I have another Christmas card for Christmas in July. I am using all Cat Scrappiness products to create this card. I think this one's really fun. It's kind of like a scene from the Nutcracker Ballet. I don't have a sentiment in the inside yet, but I'll get to that. I am using the Nutcracker Stamp Set, which is just adorable because it's got two of the little ballerinas, Clara, the Nutcracker, the Rat King. Got everything you need for the perfect little ballet scene. I also used the coordinating dies to that set. And then the real thing on this card, which I just love, is the center stage craft die. And this creates the perfect backdrop for a ballet scene. So you wouldn't have to just use it for the Nutcracker. You could use a couple of these dies from this set actually to do a little ballet themed card for a sweet little girl that you know. All right, let's get started. I initially started out with 3 ballerinas for this particular card. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a disaster with the one on the far right. So she did, well, let's put it this way, she was cut from the scene. I've got my little girl stamped out here. And for the Sugar Plum Fairy on the very left, we are going to start with a purple color. Now these are all Copic markers. The colors I am using on her little costume are BV31, BV02, and BV13. And again, when I color, I like to lay in my lightest color over the whole surface that I'm coloring. And then I'll go back in with my mid shades and my dark shades just to add the texture and the dimension. For her little wings, I'm going to be using RV00 and RV02. I will also come back in with a little bit of that BV31 and the BV02 just to add a little bit of purple highlight into those wings. I think that just kind of helps tie them into the whole costume. Now I wanted Clara's dress to be a nice soft pink color, so I am going to start out with our 000, and I'm just going to lay that in as my base color. Next, I'm going to be using R11 to add some highlights onto that dress and draw on some little folds at the bottom of the dress. I'm also going to highlight the little tights on the Sugar Plum Fairy and on Clara herself. For the final color in this combination, I'm going to be using R20, and I'm just going to go around and add just a little bit more highlights. Again, at the sash, down at the bottom of the dress, just to create more folds. Once I'm done with that, I realized I didn't do the bow in her hair, so I'm going to use those same 3 colors to color in her bow. So again, it's R000, R11, and then R20. Once I got done coloring in her little dress, I just felt it looked kind of plain. So I took one of my Copic markers, it's R39, and just started dotting her little dress in little clusters of 3. And I think that just gave that dress just a little bit extra and a little bit more interest than it just being a plain pink dress. For the hair on my Sugar Plum Fairy, I am using one of my absolute favorite color combinations. I am going to start with YR23. My mid-range is going to be YR24, and my darkest color will be YR27. I love this combination. It is actually my favorite combination for Fox. For Clara's hair, I wanted to go with something more of a blonde, And I am going to be using Y00, Y11, and Y13. Now I do have to admit this is really not blonde, it's kind of yellow, but we're going to blame it on the lighting on the stage. How's that? To finish up our little girl's hair, we need to color in their skin. So I am going to start with my usual skin combination. We're going to start with E000, and I'm just going to lay that down over all of the skin area, and then I will come back in and blend with my mid color. My mid color for the skin is E00, and I'm just going to be going around the outside edges of their face, underneath their arms, kind of the inside legs, and around that hairline. And I will finish up their skin with just the tiniest bit of E11. Now that I've got my girls all colored, it is time to use the coordinating die set to cut them out. And this is where disaster struck. So I placed my dies around each one of my girls and taped them down. I was not careful when I brought it over to my die cut machine, and the little ballerina on the very right, her die moved, and so once I got done die cutting, my die had actually cut off her arms, her one arm and one of the legs, and so there was no part of her that was left that I was going to be able to use. But it turned out to be a little happy mistake, because we decided to go a different route in our scene. So my plan B was to add a nutcracker, a couple of mice, and some little decorations for my scene. In retrospect, this was actually the best outcome, because it really makes the scene look like the Nutcracker Ballet. The other way, it wasn't quite clear unless you looked really close at Clara's arms and saw the little nutcracker in there. So this actually turned out to be just perfect. So I'm going to start with my nutcracker, and I am using red, and I am going to be using R17 as my light color. I'll go in with a little bit of R27, and then my darkest color is going to be R29. For the trim on his outfit, I am going to be using Y26. That's going to be my light color. And then I will go in with YR24 and YR27. And these are very, very small areas to color. So I don't spend a lot of time trying to make every stroke perfect. A lot of times I'm just dotting in color just to give just a little bit of variance in the color and give it a little bit of dimension and detail. So don't get all caught up in trying to make every stroke perfect, because that's almost impossible on something this size. For his pants and the trim on his hat, I'm going to be using G07 as my light color, and let's see, what am I using? G28. I also used the greens on his belt. Now we're going to color in his boots, the hat brim, and I decided to make his little mustache a gray color, also his hands. So I am starting off with C4. Sorry, I'm trying to look at my notes here. C4 is my light color, C6 is my mid color, and C8 is my darkest color. And you can see that I'm using just grays, but it does give it the appearance of black. For his face, I'm going to use a little bit of pink for his cheeks. You can barely see them behind his little mustache. And then I'm going to come in with my skin combination, same as I did on my little ballerinas. with E000, E00, and E11 is my darkest color. And I'm just gonna go around and highlight the areas that need darkening. Now, for the mice and those little teeny tufts of hair that the Nutcracker has, I'm going to be using C00, C1, and C3. I'm going to stop this video here as far as the coloring goes because the little ornaments that are uncolored here to the right side, I'm just going to be using the exact same colors that I used for my Nutcracker. So there's no point in me showing you coloring that, and we will get on to the background. Oops, before we get onto the background, we do need to cut out our little friends. So I'm going to be using the coordinating die cut set from Katscrappiness. I'm going to line them up on my images and run them through my die cutter, hoping that disaster won't strike twice. And there we have it. I have all of my little images ready to go. I guess we could say they're stage ready at this point. Now we're going to start ink blending our background. And I've got to tell you, I love to ink blend. I always think it's fun to see exactly how it's going to come out. So I have used the part of the die that's the floor to kind of help me figure out where I want my colors to lie. So I don't know if you can really see it in the video. I've got two little ticks on the right and the left of my cardstock, and that's going to give me an idea of where that floor is going to end in the background, so I can basically make sure I have the colors that I want blended up above that line. So I'm going to start out with Tumbled Glass Distressed Oxide ink, and then I'm going to move into Broken China. And then my third color is going to be Blueprint Sketch. And what I'm going to do is just go back and forth between those three colors, blending them in so that I have no harsh lines and everything kind of just blends into each other. I've cut my stage from some tan cardstock, and I don't know if you can really see it that well in the video. There are some little embossed lines that kind of draw the eye to the center of the stage. So I'm going to take a small blending brush and a little bit of vintage photo Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just going to brush up and down along those embossed lines, and that's going to give me the look of kind of like a plank or a wooden stage. It's actually ingenious having those embossed lines there. It helps so much build the right perspective. I have used the center stage craft die to cut out my curtains, and I actually cut them out in two different colors of red. So the top part of my curtain, the one that's got the little openings, is a brighter red than the piece that's down below. That's a darker red, so that's going to create the shadows in that curtain. With my liquid glue, I'm going to glue my stage to my background, and as you can see, I have just the slightest amount of that lightest blue coming above the back edge of that stage, which was what I had intended. I wanted it to look like lights were coming up that backdrop. I'm going to use a little bit of liquid glue to go ahead and glue those two layers of the curtain together. I just want to make sure that when I put that top layer on top of the bottom layer, that all of my edges are lining up nicely so that you don't have any of that dark cardstock showing where it's not supposed to be. I'm going to use liquid glue once again to adhere that curtain to my backdrop. I was thinking that the curtain goes all the way down to those bottom corners of the card, but it doesn't. It finishes just a nice, I would say maybe a quarter of an inch up from the bottom of the card, which again helps to create that extra dimension. Before I adhere my little friends to the stage, I use the die to cut out some gold glitter cardstock for those little tie back pieces. I wanted to make sure I had those on the card before I started placing my mice so that I didn't have any problems with them overlapping the heads of my mice. I've applied foam squares to the back of each one of my little friends here, and actually the thickness I used on that is 1 millimeter. That has become my new favorite size of thickness for foam, just because it makes it a lot easier to fit in envelopes and mail. Anyway, back to the card. I have applied the little foam squares on the back of each one of the little characters. I will also use a little bit of liquid glue, and that's not so much to adhere it to my card as to give me just a little bit of wiggle room to kind of move that around until it gets permanently adhered to the backdrop. As you can see, I'm just going to go ahead and peel off all of those little protective square pieces and put all of my little friends onto the stage. I wanted the little ornament pieces to decorate the front of my curtain, but I didn't like the way that the white cardstock was showing on the outside edges of that ornament piece. So I went back in with one of my Copic markers that kind of matched that brighter color of cardstock for the curtain, and I just colored in all that white area, and I feel like it just blended in nicely, and they don't stand out so glaringly with that white outside trim. Oh my goodness, this was turning out to be a rough die cutting day. I somehow lost my other little ornament, so off camera I had to stamp and color another one out. And of course, as I was cleaning up, I found it, but it was a little bit too late. So I've got my one cut out and colored, and I'll go ahead and adhere that to the front part of my curtain, and I will eventually get that second one applied to the curtain also. I felt like putting a sentiment on the front of this card would really detract from the whole stage theme, so I will put a sentiment on the inside of this card. And that pretty much does it for this card. I will link all the products that I used for this particular card down below. Make sure you stop by Scrapiness's store to check out other items. They've got all kinds of fun things that will spark some creativity, I'm sure. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you'd like to be notified of future videos. You can also follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdell or on my blog, sandycogdelldesigns.com. Again, thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today, and until next time, bye-bye.